Out of respect of our time, I know we'll have some other members joining us shortly. We'll go ahead and we will call to order this meeting. I feel weird kind of announcing myself, but I'll be the interim chair, until the next election season. So, good to see you. Oh, thank you. So, as the interim, I'll just go ahead and just say thank you again for everything that you all do. We all have busy lives, and it does take a level of dedication and service, to have these meetings outside of our normal times and to make those phone calls, so it's appreciated. And so, we have our agenda. Does everyone have their agenda? Awesome. So we've got not a ton to do today, just some information. Hello, good to see you. And so we'll have our committee report out, and this will just be a great opportunity for us to become familiar with the other work that's being done, and also a chance for some discussion around that, because even though we're meeting separately, we're all still one commission. All right? So I will just, I'll go in order. So we'll have racial equity, Chair Timothy Johnson over that committee.
So, point of order, are we able to add new things to the agenda? We're going to have an opportunity to add to today's agenda?
I believe that we can, yeah, because, as time allows.
Okay. We don't have a robust agenda today, so I'd like to add under new business, if there was a new business line, DEIB audits.
Is there a motion to add this to the new business?
I don't think we need a motion to add agenda items.
Well, I just wanted to do my first motion to them. But that's okay. No, that's fine.
Take it for a spin.
You are right. You're right. No, that's good. All right. So that's been added to new business. All right. Anyone else? Points of discussion? No? Sir.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Chair. The report out of the Racial Equity Committee meeting of August 2nd was a good one. We went over some old business items that we had discussed previously, namely, we had asked Director Brown for an update on our request for a name change. You'll remember that we brought this before the larger body several months ago, feeling that the name of both the commission and the subcommittee, Racial Justice and Equality, didn't quite get to the spirit of what we were going for, that we made the suggestion, and you all subsequently voted to change the name to Equity. So now that process is working its way through. Director Brown reported that she's been meeting with the law department. They are drafting an amendment to the ordinance. Once that gets approved, it'll go to City Council for a vote. And then once the council has had 2 readings and vote on it, the name will officially change. So we talked about that. We also asked for we talked about the process because we request the results of the DEIB training that LFUCG staff took probably a little over a year ago. And Director Brown reported that the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer is working with the Human Resources area of the city to approve the release. That release date is unknown at this time, but we thought that it would be helpful for us as both as a subcommittee and an entire commission to sort of get feedback on what the staff thought and what the report shows around the training that they received as a jumping off place, especially since one of our committee's recommendation was that subsequent boards, commissions, councils, and other sort of vehicles of the city also be required to take mandatory DEIB training. So that's also in process. Then we talked a little bit about, previously we had Dr. Roger Cleveland come speak to our group, I believe in April, at our April meeting. He's the one that did both the training for LFUCG staff, but also is a sort of recognized expert in the field. I use that word, expert, sparingly, because I don't know if he would say that or not, but I think he's an expert. One of the things that he mentioned to us was that a suggestion for our subcommittee is that we might want to start looking at doing some desk audits, doing some surveying, and pulling data generally from DEIB efforts in the city, especially in advance of the larger ask that's coming forth of having Lexington commit to having its own equity report. And he thought that these processes take 6 to 9 months to happen. So rather than wait until the report is voted on and authorized, hopefully in the next budget season, that we might want to start pulling together some of this data now. So our committee talked about, what are some of the sources that we might want to pull some of this information and compile it. One of our members raised a really good, I think it was Phil, in fact, raised a good point that we might want to bring this to the entire commission to have some of the other subcommittees in their various roles around health, criminal justice, et cetera, also start compiling some of this information. I feel like I'm not doing an adequate job of describing this. Anybody else on the subcommittee agree? Is that sort of what we said? So
Right.
we're bringing this to the larger group just so you all can think about in your own subcommittees, starting to compile information around contact information, surveys, desk audits of efforts. That way, once a consultant is identified, we can share that information with them and they can get a running start versus having to sort of start the research process, 9 months from now.
I think I can add to that.
Yes, please.
So we will have some information that's already collected internally, and we want to know what do we already know, and then we would love to know from all of the subcommittees, what do you want to know that we are not aware of yet? And, is there a chance where we can start to collect some new information that would eventually let us know if we're talking about can we move the needle, what is the needle monitoring? So what are the research questions that we want to know that we would want answered in an audit that we could track over time? What do we want to know and what do we already have access to?
Thank you. And then the last point from our committee meeting, we were joined by members of the Department of Planning. Director Brown arranged to have Chris Taylor, who's the long-range planning manager, and Boyd Seaway, who's a senior planner, come and speak to our group. And it was a very good, robust conversation where we had an opportunity to talk about the 2023 comprehensive plan update process and how they made us aware that for the first time, the comprehensive plan established equity as a pillar for the neighborhood section of the plan. And that, in fact, a lot of the information from the initial commission from 2020, a lot of that language was used by the Planning Commission in creating sort of the equity section of the neighborhood portion of the plan. Previously, it wasn't delineated. There's more details in my actual committee report, so I'm not going to read it verbatim. But it was good to know that that information didn't just sit on a shelf; that they're actually incorporating it into the plan. And in putting it into the plan, we know that once it's put out there and it's public, it gives them something to start measuring against and sort of benchmarking the city. He stated that there's going to be some town hall sessions coming up. I think there's one either just passed or coming up one really soon where they're going to start soliciting feedback from the communities at large. They shared that we don't have to necessarily wait until the town hall to gain access to the draft of the comprehensive plan. It's not done yet, but they'd be willing to share it with this commission. So we asked Director Brown to secure a copy of that and send it around to the members of the whole commission so we can use it in our individual subcommittees as well as for our own edification. He also talked a little bit about the role of the planning department. We asked him to sort of describe what their mandates are and sort of like where their roles sort of intersect the issues of equity. He explained how the planning department They write policies to steer development, but not to dictate it. And that, I think a question came up from one of our commissioners around the role of gentrification in some of the planning, especially around housing. And Mr. Taylor explained that the plan, the comprehensive plan, its goal is to help mitigate gentrification. Sometimes that happens without actual money, or having the money authority. But sometimes the policy they put in place may not be adequate for the need. And also stated that the planning department looks at gentrification and displacement as two very different, distinct things, and that they want to make investment in the community, and that's important, they agree, but it should come without displacement. That's never really their goal. They also said that they would be happy at some point if the entire commission wanted to have them come and present. They would be willing to do that as well. And then we talked about some of the recommendations that we had already previously brought forth to the entire commission in terms of recommendations that we'd like to see included in the report that's being compiled. And Commissioner Drury volunteered to help work on the report on the behalf of the subcommittee to make sure she adds some color to not only our recommendations, but the decisions and the rationales behind those recommendations that we brought forth early this year. So it's our report.
Thank you. Lots of good information. Does anyone have any questions or want to ask for some clarity? Excellent. I haven't had a chance to read the entire report, but I look forward to. Thank you all for the work. Alrighty. Next, we will have a report out from the LASIA Committee, also known as Law Enforcement, Justice, and Accountability. I recognize Chair Wells.
Thank you, Chair Fields. I will say that you do not have a hard copy of this. We rely on digital minutes, basically to compile the report, and I did not have access to those. It's no fault of anyone's but mine. But just to report out, if you'll let me try your patience here, I'll try to do this as concisely and succinctly as possible. August 3rd meeting, basic agenda items were the flock safety program discussion update. Really, there were no updates or response to the 7 flock safety program questions. Those questions were for the Lexington Police Department flock safety team. You can actually reference the July 5th report of this committee to see those 7 questions. As far as current recommendations or discussion items that were a part of the August 3rd meeting, original LASIA committee recommendations number 2, number 14, and number 17 through 25 will transition to the full RJEC for further vetting due to the LASIA committee's limited purview and lack of statutory authority to adequately address those recommendations. LASIA committee chair will work with RJEC chair and Director Brown to answer questions, determine details of that transition, and outline expected outcomes of transitioning the listed recommendations to the full RJEC for further vetting. Any ongoing or new developments related to the listed recommendations will be monitored by the current LASIA committee and reported back to the full RJEC in addition to the RJEC's vetting. Example, inviting guests, professionals from the community to LASIA committee meetings to discuss and answer questions about the listed recommendations. Next review of current recommendation was the flock safety program signage. Formal proposal to install signage on the physical cameras to increase the level of transparency for residents of Lexington as well as for people visiting our city. New committee recommendations, none. Public comment, none. 2023 Racial Justice and Equality Full Commission Report. Director Brown shared updates regarding the full commission report due in October and the reporting process. Coming out of our August 3rd meeting, it was proposed that we have a special meeting to address or vote on the current recommendations or the discussion items that have been put forth prior to August 3rd, but also at the August 3rd meeting. That special meeting was on August the 14th, and I already previously stated the current recommendations that were on the table, current recommendations / discussion items. Nothing really new as far as the first recommendation that was on the table. Regarding the flock safety program signage, a question was posed by Director Brown to Chair Wells as to why flock safety program signage recommendation discussion continues to move forward when there was no consensus amongst the committee at the June meeting that would warrant it moving forward. A note to that was the Leisure Committee had received no updates or response from the Lexington Police Department to the 7 flock safety program questions at the time of this special meeting on August the 14th. Director Brown, on behalf of the Leisure Committee, was unable to schedule time for the Lexington Police Department to meet with or make a flock safety program presentation to the committee up through the August 3rd Leisure Committee meeting. That was due to some scheduling conflicts. Also, it definitely was impacted by the passing of Officer Caleb Conley and the subsequent memorial service or funeral service for him. As far as the vote, there were 2 items on the table: violent crime, gun group violence intervention progression, and also a review of the LPD mission statement and core values formal review. Committee vote, there was also a subsequent motion and second to not move these discussion items forward as recommendations. These discussion items will be further vetted at forthcoming Leisure Committee meetings. That is inclusive of me mentioning the flock safety program signage as well as the 2 aforementioned recommendations. They will not move forward as recommendations, but they will remain as discussion items. Public comment, none. Final comments. Chair Wells requested additional time from Director Brown to work through report process. Committee progress and next steps. This was from our July report. Submit questions to Commander Matthew Grayhouse with the goal of having those questions answered and or explained by the August 3rd Leisure Committee meeting. Update to that, Director Brown scheduled a flock safety program live simulation for the Leisure Committee members on Thursday, August 24th with the Lexington Police Department flock safety team. It was held at the LPD Intelligence Center just down the street. The simulation was facilitated by LPD Commander Matthew Greathouse and other members of the department. Flock safety program team, it included Chief Lawrence Weathers, who was in attendance as well. Committee members Phil John, Kennedy Wells, and Whit Whitaker were in attendance. During the simulation, Commander Greathouse provided answers to the 7 questions put forth by the Leisure Committee coming out of the June committee meeting. The simulation was an engaging and productive learning experience. Recap and follow-up will be an agenda item for the October Leisure Committee meeting. Next item, as far as committee progress and next steps, work with Director Brown regarding final determination on current recommendation letter A, which was stated earlier from the August 3rd meeting agenda. Next, follow up with Director Brown regarding the Prosecutor's Center for Excellence being contracted by the Commonwealth Attorney's Office to do a review of that office, pursuing a meeting with Kimberly Baird or a representative of that office to visit the Leisure Committee to provide further updates or specific details regarding the timeline of that review, completion, and results of the assessment. That's the report of the Leisure Committee. And I will say this is in draft form. There are some pieces of information related mainly just to the logistics of who was in attendance, and then call to order and meeting adjournment. I will need those digital minutes in order to fill that information in, and at which time I have that completed, I will forward that to Director Brown.
Thank you. I just have a point of clarification.
Sure.
Those 7 outstanding questions that were posed to the police department, is Commander Greathouse the point of contact to answer those?
Yes, he was, and he did provide answers to those at the live simulation that was on August the 24th.
Okay.
So the questions have been answered, and the follow-up to that will be done at our October meeting, committee meeting.
Thank you.
Excuse me, just a question. So, I mean, there was a lot there. Just for clarity, though, the flock program is in place. They were, just as more of expansion to the flock program, just, I guess.
No, if you're referring to the live simulation,
Yeah,
Are you referring
that
to-
piece was to highlight the flock program, correct?
yes, it was basically just to give us a, peek behind the curtain. Well, not so much that they have a curtain, but it allowed us to have access to real time almost to what they see and what they do, what is involved in the flock safety program and its use. They gave us basically full demonstration of that process.
Gotcha. And so the committee's view on that piece
It was mainly because the fuses part of it, which the flock cameras are going to be integrated together. So with the fuses system, businesses and homes can buy in, integrate, so that the police can have use of business cameras if they authorize it, or
Okay.
home cameras if they authorize it. Everyone who there are 2 levels. If you express an interest, and I forget what it's called, they still have to call you to ask for permission for you to send them. But if you are fully integrated, they've already got permission. So some business fully integrated,
Okay.
they have permission to
And
use
so
it.
they would have a camera boom that could be tied into the flock system.
Yeah, it's like
Gotcha.
a little box,
Okay.
and like 4 or 5 cameras can be integrated to it.
Gotcha.
It's the software.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I just want to restate to make sure I heard you correctly. In the simulation, they showed you how they can integrate with different camera systems, whether it be owned by a business or a residence,
Yes, with permission.
with their permission.
And
And even after the initial permission's given,
Right.
when it's real time being asked to access it, they have to make a phone call or,
right, and they don't monitor it, still have enough people to monitor 24/7. So
Gotcha.
it's usually, somebody says, hey, we had a robbery 2 weeks ago, can you pull up? And the people who are authorized to use the center can pull it up. They do have, they did answer questions about oversight. Pretty much whatever click happens, it goes to evidence.com.
Gotcha.
So you just can't have some random person in there clicking. I did bring up the fact that for them to understand that even if the all officers were trustworthy, even if the system is fully on the positive side and does what it's supposed to be trying to do as a tool to deter crime, to prevent crime, I told them that it's important that they understand the relationship between law enforcement and the African American community and people who have been over-policed, and that the feelings matter. So it's not going to matter if this system works, does what it's supposed to do, has great oversight, nothing shady is going on. People are going to believe what they believe, and their feelings are real. So I beg them to start trying to create monthly forums, and that can go through groups or go through us, to where they can come to the community, and then questions can be answered, and then they could, because what they tell us is we're getting the deep dive because we are inquiring, but a lot of people won't get that. I also told them to think about making their transparency page, even though it's on the police system, even though it's on the website, to put it in a place where you don't have to fish through and do a lot of clicking because everyone's not tech savvy. But the main thing I want them to understand is you can't be defensive if people don't have trust. That's something that has to be built up. So.
Just, I'm curious, and this might not have been covered, but if, let's say I have a Ring system at my house and I have purchased a server subscription, would they also have access to that? I'm just curious, if you recall.
If you gave, like say there are 2 levels, you can say you can register, and nothing happens. And if something happens to your neighborhood, they have to call you and say, hey, crime is in your neighborhood. Could you send us your video? You don't have to.
Okay. All
They'll
right.
send you a link, but you don't have to when you register. Now the businesses, it's mostly been businesses that do the second level beyond the registration. They've given full permission for them to access their cameras. In the case of some financial institutions like banks or whatever, there's a 3rd level. They cannot encroach unless, like somebody broke into the bank vault or something like that, and then that 3rd level would automatically the firewall will break that down. They can get that information, but then it goes back up. So the bottom line is you don't have to opt in. I guess that's what it's called, opt in. You don't have to opt in, and even if you register, if they call and say, hey, there was a crime in your area, would you mind if we see your video? Here's a link. You don't have to send it.
If anyone wants to attend, to go to the intelligence unit, it's live. It's not a simulation. It's live.
Yeah.
I don't mind to set that up. It's usually about an hour tour, and you get to go to the intelligence center and see how it works and answer any questions.
That was my second time.
This morning
Yes.
in the Downtown Lexington Management District meeting, that was brought out. And on the businesses, what is going to happen is they're going to be installing a server, the tiny little
Right.
box, that conduit. But the businesses will have the right to identify the outside cameras and the inside cameras. So that it's not always all out there, and it requires your permission. The Downtown Lexington Management District is going to offer grants to the businesses to offset that cost. But I have not seen the simulation or seen how it integrates. But in the businesses, you can have up to 4 cameras and one specific, then you can grow to the others, more cameras. But most of the businesses agreed that they would allow the police to have access to the outside. They were looking at cameras that were placed on the parking lot, I believe, and they said that the resolution was fantastic.
Yeah.
You could see quite a bit. And again, it has to be with the business permission, but once they install the box, I don't know what kind of control they have.
Yeah. When you register, that's all it is registration. They still have to come to you to say, hey, can we use your information? Can you find this? They'll send you a link to send. When you opt in, you're giving them control to pull up that information. Now you can later opt out if you want to, too. So if you decide, I don't want this to happen. So it's not just random takeover. There are things in place. And with that being said, we understand that people's feelings matter. History matters. So it has, as I was telling them, and as I've told people in interviews, it just has to be used as a tool. It can't just be the end all. It has to be just simply used as a tool. But there are other things that the city and organizations have to do. You have to start addressing the causes behind the violent crime and things like that, and not just saying using the cameras to get everybody. Because one of the concerns were a lot of community people were thinking, oh, so I have a Ring camera, they can get my camera. Well, they can't unless you give full opt-in, you know. So it's not the future system. You just can't take it over. It's software that allows your cameras on your premises to integrate so they can read. And even then, it's not someone sitting there 24/7 watching the thing. You might, like we had a robbery last month, can you look in this area? And they demonstrated one of those where there was something that went on and how they pulled it back up. People who there are people who are assigned to the center, and then anyone else comes in, there's a physical log as well as a digital log, and each click that you do goes to evidence.com. The information on that server, once it's pulled down, is saved. What was it, 30 days or 60 days? There is a deadline for deletion that it has to go. The businesses, they have, like as you said, they have to purchase their own servers, so they're trying to work out to where do some financial balancing for that cost analysis. But the videos, they say, would be on their particular servers, which they would have to download and send, or give permission to LPD to pull that off. So.
I think it would definitely be worthwhile for us to be able to see it, just to save manpower and whatnot. Could we get maybe interest? See who's interested well in advance. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I say we send it out to the entire group, and then all right.
And I'm willing to go again.
So okay. That'll be 3. You'll just give us. They don't need anybody. You could just give us the. Yeah, that'll be number 3. Thank you, and thank you for sharing that opportunity. Yeah, I think it would be great for as many of us to go through it together as possible.
But I think the important piece of it, as I said, they're going to have to go to the community.
100%.
Because you can say this works, or it's trying to do what it's supposed to do, but if you have preconceived notions, if you're thinking about the history of policing, over policing, it's not going to matter. Right. So I had somebody text me and NAACP and said I think you all should support this because they took it out of context. And I said, no, we don't give a blanket support of any institution, especially one that hasn't been aggressive. So, but what we do, we support any tool that can be used as a preventative measure with full oversight, with community engagement and involvement that prevents crime, but used in conjunction with other programs and policies to fight the issues and the reasons behind crime. Somebody's stealing because don't have a job and he's hungry. Things like that. So it's not a blanket. You do what you want to. We're always watching. So, but at some point we talk about we need to deter crime and we have to start somewhere, but everyone has to be engaged and involved. Everyone has to hold themselves and those institutions accountable. Because as I told the police department, you have things in place, oversight, but people are human too, and people, you just can't trust everybody. So we just need to make sure that we're walking that journey with them. So.
I just want to add something too to amplify what you're saying. I'm looking forward to you all having the discussion and debrief in your subcommittee, and especially the discussion that you want to have over the answers to those 7 questions that you've been looking forward to. And so we might want to consider that you can tell us when you want the rest of us to go on that tour. Would it be after your discussion or in anticipation of it or anything like that?
Short answer to that would be no.
Okay.
But I think having some time to sort of, I guess, let it marinate in terms of the simulation, but also try to get the other commissioners, because like I stated, it was only myself and Mr. Whitaker and Mr. John. So we can bring everybody in and let them kind of hear what our take was that goes beyond just sort of the technical side of it, but what type of feelings did we walk away from it with. So definitely that would be a part of our December report. In fact, it would be a large part of it. That's the goal at least.
I understand where you're coming from though, because I think your perception is having that information ahead of time would allow us to be more interactive
And
during the
perhaps
time.
there, if there's some kind of follow-up that, or if you want to kind of plant something for us to consider while we're there, out of your discussion or something like that, that could make the demonstration meaningful in some
Other
way.
than Mr. Whitaker, I know speaking for myself, I won't speak for Mr. John, but I had no, I sort of went in with a blank slate. I'm glad I did actually,
Got
because
it. That's
it
meaningful
also
too.
opened
That's
up.
meaningful, yeah.
And from the standpoint of coming back, bringing back what you may see prior to us giving a recap, we could sort of merge the two.
I like
Or we
that.
could balance off of each other, and those perspectives can probably inform not only the recap, but also what happens going forward. So
That's
I would
like a
I would
big-
encourage you to, don't use like us, the committee making a report to set up the simulation with Director Brown. I would try to get it done as quickly as possible as everyone's schedule would allow. It was beneficial for me.
Great.
That's what I'll leave it with.
Most especially when money is involved. We are going to be giving out quite a few grants, and my fear is when people have an incentive to attach their system, when there's very little cost to them, they're going to say automatically yes, but we're not thinking about exactly this conversation. Unfortunately, in the downtown Lexington Management District, I'm the only Hispanic, and there's only one African American that represents the business community. We need that voice. So, like you, I would say we need to schedule those as quickly as possible and understand, because I've been charged to create the policies to start shelling out money.
There's also a great, an overwhelming response by the community to opt in to this, to FUSIS.
Interesting.
So the day that it was released, there were like 100 cameras. There are several thousands now with individual residents who have bought into this. So the community wants to be safe. They want to also help police solve crime. So those are also alternative things to think about when we're coming from a community perspective, is that the community is buying into opting into this FUSIS system.
And like you said, most of those are businesses, and a lot of them are ones who are just registered, so they didn't fully opt in. But the number from the day they did the news report, I mean, we saw it was just, I mean, it was maybe 10 times. It was, yeah, it was just like overnight. People just opted in, and like I said, a great number of them registered. So you still have to ask the user, but there were a lot of businesses, mostly businesses, fully opted in.
And so these numbers that you're talking about, this is something that, anyone can take a look at on.
It's available on the transparency page.
Yep.
Gotcha.
And I think he said, if I'm not mistaken, there is like a video simulation that you can access too, kind of what we think, as far as and that may have just been the opt-in process. But there's the video showing how it works and how you can opt out, etc. The one thing we did ask was if someone wanted to opt out, because if you opt out of something, email, or you just get something that says, well, that doesn't happen, it just opt out so people know. So we said, well, that might be something you need to consider, to rework the software or do whatever it needs to be. So if someone says they opted out, they get proof that they opted out. So, but somewhere down the line, if you're using their cameras, no, you said I opted out. So, but right now, there's not. If I opt out, if I've given full control and I change my mind, it's allegedly just, okay, just opts me out and takes me off. But I don't receive anything, so I don't know it.
Confirmation email.
Right.
Or text. All right, well, thank you all. And so now we will have our report out from the Education and Economics Opportunities Committee. We recognize Chair Castro.
Thank you, sir. We had a meeting on August 2nd, 2023. There were several of our members present, I think all of us. And we basically reviewed their existing recommendations. As the subcommittee, we wanted to see what the previous recommendations were. And it became apparent that at least some of the, if not all of the recommendations that were presented prior to our subcommittee have been looked at and they're working on. In our previous meeting, the one on July, we realized that Community Action Council continues to be a valuable partner to the city in the education side. However, during our discussion, it became apparent that we still need additional data. Even considering what has been done, what hasn't been done, there's a lot of investment by the city, by the public schools, into education. And we had a number of questions ourselves that we couldn't answer. And therefore, I steered our committee to focus on recommendation number 3 in the education side that looks at creating a person or office that really looks at the whole education. During our discussion, it became clear that there's many gaps in education. Community Action Council is looking at Head Start, early Head Start. They're doing a good job. But what's happening in middle school? What's happening in the transition from middle school to high school? How can we come along and partner with Fayette County Public Schools and identify? We looked at after school. After school is being taken care of, but all our communities taking care of that? So we identified that many programs are addressing specific needs in specific areas of town. However, nothing pointed us to a solid understanding of Lexington's current education status. Towards the end of the meeting, Ms. Scully shared what I think, and I'm not an educator, a really awesome report by the Hardwood Institute. They spent 9 months interviewing people, looking at voices, and it was a report that was co-sponsored or sponsored by the United Way of the Bluegrass. The report identifies that Lexington needs to ensure that all voices are heard. However, since there's no office or person specifically identified to collect data, to review data from the different programs, we could not answer even our own questions. So we believe that this position recommended by the previous commission is key to making sure that Lexington moves into the right direction. However, we did not delve into that position, so there's still a lot of gaps that I need to get with my committee and look at the specifics. But Mr. Hardwood writes in that report, educating young people is one of the most basic functions of a community. How people see education in their kids is often a mirror of how they see themselves and their connection to the community. Without these strong connections, people's engagement in community efforts diminishes. Public will for change recedes and people lose hope. As a result, in part of our report, we look at what the city has done, continues to do. We brought up the mobile classroom, which is fantastic. A lot of other programs that are addressing the gaps, but we're still seeing gaps in our populations. I reached out to EKU, and we have a problem with minorities, and that's not just the African American community. We are seeing a gap in the Hispanic community. Now, in the Hispanic community, unfortunately, I cannot get parents to buy into the idea to look and reach out for what the schools offer. They don't want to send their kids, yet the programs are there. But we're thinking that a person, an office, is pivotal to identify what is out there. What else can we bring in? Where are we? Just like you said, we need an audit to tell us where we are, how we can move forward. So we're looking at that. I didn't finish the report that you have in your packages, really a first draft. It was something that I put together that I would like to first send it to my subcommittee and look at that in deeper, much deeper. But we have partners. How can we use those partners and the data they have to truly invite everybody to make Lexington a better place educationally? Because we have great universities. We have so many universities around here. It's incredible. But can we get our kids there? And can we use our education system? Because all of you know, education is directly linked to economic opportunity. If that basis is not there, we will always have that economic opportunity be less and less and less for our members of minority communities. As a result of this conversation, we believe that the position recommended by the original commission continues to be key to our efforts in education and economic opportunities in Lexington. So that was the whole focus of our last meeting on August 2nd. Mr. Bob McClellan had some fantastic questions. And the more I talked to him, the littlest I feel, because he's such a great mind. But we need those answers. We need to look at what's happening. How can we partner with Fayette County Public Schools to ensure that they don't just take the burden on themselves, but we as a community includes everybody in the educational efforts of the city. Any questions?
I'll just add, we spent time transitioning the thought process away from only talking about early childhood. Even though it's vital, we spend a lot of time there, recommendations were in place. We have to start thinking more holistically, K through 12, community-based, but we haven't even talked about the assessment of what's offered to youth. We talk about Partners for Youth, we talk about Community Action Council. This is a large community. And so we spent some time discussing that, and then I'll even just on the fact of the big picture of education and economic workforce, or looking at the workforce in that pipeline. I mean, diverse communities, are we doing the education in order to keep our youth here? Our diverse workforce, which we lack here in Lexington as well. So I think we just have to take a step back, do a little bit more of a holistic approach in looking at everything, and then see where that takes us. And that number 3 recommendation around the person is important, but the underlining piece is the leverage of resources and opportunity, which we have a lot of resources here in Lexington, but we may not be using them to the best benefit of our community and our youth. And so the underlying thing is that leverage of alignment, resources, and human capital. And if it needs to have a person be able to hone in and focus on that, then the city is lacking that.
And borrowing a line from that report, coordinating is not the answer. Because we can do a lot of coordinating, according to Mr. Richard Hartwood, but not move the data forward. So this position, or whoever, what it's shaped up to be, needs to be a leader, needs to be that person, as Ms. Colley says, that looks at it holistically, look at the resources, and put them all together for the benefit of our youth. Yes?
So, wow, it's a lot. I know that we focus a lot on early ed, and I agree that we need to expand it to K-12. At all, did the topic of adult education come into the picture? Because I don't know specifically here in Lexington, but anecdotally, I know a lot of times we almost forget about those who are already here. You know, the education system, for one reason or the other, has failed them. They're now adults, and we look to young people, which is important because they're the future. But we still got a lot of people who are going to be here for a lot of decades. You know, that we may or may not be intentional about providing adults with the education they need in order to take advantage of the economic opportunities. Did that come up at all?
We talked about families, but not specifically diving into adult education. But just that there was I don't even think, we did not.
No, we did not. We didn't know.
That's a good,
That as
it's a good suggestion.
Yeah, the
worth
closest we came to it was talking about some of the family resources that are available through Fayette County Public Schools to utilize with their children in the home, and some of the different translation opportunities, because language barriers still exist. And we actually did talk about the model of one that I know Ms. Sass will be very, very familiar with, which is the community health worker, where you have liaisons that will go out and help interact with the community and provide resources. Well, that same thing, which is essentially that position, stands to do that.
I'm thinking about like adults who are not even reading and able to do math at, say, like the 5th or 6th grade level, which keeps them disenfranchised from any meaningful, life-sustaining type of employment opportunities. So.
Is there a program, I guess they have a GED program, but is there
And
a
that's just it,
program?
I'm not sure.
There
I know
are.
anecdotally,
Okay.
but do people know where they are?
See,
That's the
I
other
didn't-
thing. Like,
It goes back a lot to the leverages and resources. I know that for us, when we work with, we embody some adult education because we focus on the whole family.
Yep.
And so we partner with BCTC Skills U around their adult education, GED, EL classes. But it expands beyond that because that's also, we talk about financial literacy and different things like that, but there's a life coaching thing that
Right.
needs to take place that families may need as well. But there's resources, but I don't know if we are, again, leveraging them as a community to make sure that we're increasing the knowledge of everyone about what's available. And in the fact that Skills U is connected, I think they have a different name now, but they're connected to BCTC. You're not just talking about like education and stop, but they have programs that are entryway that lead to not just jobs, but also career pathways and opportunities. But we leave adults out of it.
There's a Carnegie Center for Literacy and Learning. They also have literacy programs as well. It sounds like we might need to think about looking at consolidating some resources.
Now, there's some discussions that are taking place that we probably can look into around adult education. I keep hearing it discussed in pockets here and there, but again, not as collaborative as we need to be as a city.
Chair Castro, well, one question regarding like the summer youth job program. Commissioner Scully mentioned about capacity. It's noted here that there are 300 slots basically available. So do we know statistically if those are being maxed out?
Yeah, when I reached out to them, they did not this year, but I reached and talked to Mr. What is his name? Arthur Lucas.
Yeah.
And he said there were still some spot. That's the first conversation that we had.
Yeah, that was, but I think that was before orientation.
Okay, yes.
And, yeah.
So they did fill them up?
Yes.
Perfect, yeah. So it's good, because that's when he sent me that email that I was kind of started that conversation, because they didn't have enough youth that had applied. But that's great news, because I think in previous years, they've done 100%. And they could use more businesses to partner with them, because what they do is they partner with, LFUCG pays for them, but they send them out to the workforce.
And as far as what type of jobs they engage in, I mean,
There was an application in the LFUCG website, but it did not identify but I know that they were looking at a number of clerks, cashiers, entry level in most of the places.
and is there an educational or life skills component attached to that, or is it just?
I'm not sure of that, but I know like even the jobs, they can be career focused. We have like a technology department, legal department, so we have students ourselves, and we put them in specific areas. So when they do the fair, students are able to connect based on some of their known interests that they have at that time. But I'm not sure about the life skills piece. I know that came back as some feedback to the organizers around professionalism and different things like that, just to help build some of those things, those skills around it.
And those classes are being offered through state and public schools now. Too.
Financial
So they're
literacy is.
course curriculum for upperclassmen.
Financial literacy is.
Any other questions? Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And now the chair recognizes himself as as the chair of housing and gentrification. So I totally, you're supposed to introduce me. I messed that
Well,
up.
I was, but due to some medical issues, Mr. Marshall is trying to chair and be reporting for the housing and gentrification. which I'll be sharing my information with him as well. So here he is.
Awesome. Thank you. So we have a report here, and everything that could be on here is not, simply because I kept it to the highlights. Essentially, we had several different discussions, as most of you all did in your committees, and overwhelmingly we found that the progress that had been made was great, especially from an aspect of financial assistance and financial programs put forward for the communities to utilize. One thing kept coming up through various conversations, which was the fact that many members of the public had not been appropriately educated, or they had, in some cases, had some miscommunication about how the programs work together. So either they didn't know that it was available, or they were not sure of how they worked. So they were missing out on potential monies and potential assistance that could be provided. And so we started down a path focusing on that, given the fact that the money was there and this is considerable low-hanging fruit. And so, former chair had a discussion with Charlie Lanter, Commissioner of the Department of Housing, Advocacy, and Community Development. And the goal of that was just to figure out what efforts were being made and what we could do differently. And during that conversation, he revealed that that was not something that he himself could handle. So then she was directed to Kissick, thank you, Carlisha Kissick, McKissick, thank you, affordable housing specialist. And so there were a few meetings that had been scheduled where we were going to get together. They had been canceled, and so after that there was a communication between former chair and Ms. McKissick that she was not the right person to go to. And so she referred us to talk with the council and make a recommendation to the council to put funding dollars toward a educational campaign to solicit the public and make sure that they're aware of the different programs that are available, and then also just provide a form of community engagement around that. And so, in addition to that, during our last commission meeting on June 7th, I had talked about the benefits, and you've seen some of the things that came from that, but I talked about some of the benefits of having consolidated information that can be presented to the public and then also disseminated through various channels to make sure that the level of awareness that is needed to take advantage of this, especially for programs that have had low participation, is out there. Because it doesn't matter what you create, if the public doesn't know that they can utilize it, then it's useless. So increasing the communication around that. And so that became the Housing Assistance Resource Guide, which I had sent that out to everyone here. And some folks have disseminated that through different channels that they are connected with. And I actually spoke to Ms. Sass before the meeting started. Would you mind to share the feedback?
Sure. So I have a group of community health workers that work for me, and we keep a local resource, but it's hard to keep up a resource of everything, and you can't always know everything. And so I asked if I could disseminate the resource guide that was presented to us, and I presented it to them and said, here, use this. And they're like, oh my gosh, where has this been? So they were very thankful to have other resource opportunities for our patients that we serve.
Excellent. And just to help folks understand, because I know that community health workers is becoming more and more popular, but could you kind of tell us what a community health worker is?
So basically they are a liaison between the community. I guess really probably an advocate for community partners, citizens, patients, however, whatever population of people they're serving, but an advocate for them, linking them to community resources, helping them navigate the healthcare system, just all different things. And I think that even as that position or that job evolves, they can be used for so many other things. One would be the education, and that we've talked about the distrust of the Hispanic population in some of those after-school programs or education programs, just helping to build. And usually community health workers live and work in the neighborhoods in which they live, so, and of the people that they're serving.
And I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, but there's like this resounding theme across many of the committees about the need to have a level of community engagement that comes from the community or with the community, and that just gets me excited, because I think the line that we can draw between it, it can help reinforce the total need, because it's not just one place, it's kind of universal. And along those lines, increasing awareness, we have a few recommendations that can help benefit how this information is able to get out to the folks who need it. And so we've outlined some of the different things that we're suggesting, but essentially it would be someone who is going to interact with the public and to make sure that there is a level of awareness. This would be someone who could be designated to talk with different groups, housing associations or community engagements, as well as an outreach campaign. So if there was no position and it was strictly a matter of taking the information that is needed so that they can make an intelligent decision on, okay, yes, this is a resource that I qualify for, I want to take advantage of this, how do I get access to it? If we have that information getting out through various channels, then I think that will make a big difference. And we all agreed on that. And so we have the parameters for an outreach campaign. It's comprised of both informational marketing material from a physical level and a digital level, because I think we've all probably seen the case where there's one modality of communication being utilized and it leaves so much opportunity to reach people on the table. Because if we had a huge Facebook campaign, then that's the assumption that everybody's on Facebook. I know they're not. And if we had physical forms that were placed in offices, only the people that go to the offices are going to get it. And if you don't know that there's even an office to go to, how would you ever see the information? So I think considering the media consumption habits and then also the foot traffic that's currently taking place among the demographics that are in need is crucial. That way we can better reach and provide the resources that are already there. So I would say that is primarily it. I'm not going to read through everything. You all can read through some of the bullet points, and I will hand it over.
I want to elaborate a little bit. With the meeting, with the phone call with Ms. McKissick, she canceled because of the weather the first time. And then we talked again, and after discussing with her what we were wanting, she said their office could not do that. And so they have a housing advocate that they said the public can call her and she can kind of help them a little bit. But the problem is getting a little better. People are finding out more about affordable housing. But the main problem is they don't understand the program. Now, I took a tour of Kearney Creek, and the property manager there said she pretty much gets bawled out about once a week when people come out there because they're not understanding how affordable housing works. So Ms. McKissick said, we really, as Chair Marshall said, we have to go to the council and solicit funds for educating them. They provided the funds and they voted, to agree to fund affordable housing. But in the budget, they didn't include how to educate the public, but really how to make them understand the process of affordable housing. And that's one of the biggest problems is they're not understanding. I mean, like I said before, I've gotten bawled out a couple of times. Well, it's not affordable housing. How's $840? I said, well, look at the apartment you're living in. It's like a $1,200 or $1,300 or $1,400 apartment, swimming pool and everything. It's affordable compared to the fair market price. And if you have a Section 8 voucher, then it's even more affordable. So it's almost a three-step process, but people are coming to these properties and demanding, well, this is not affordable housing, da 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 da. So that's the hope of the recommendation we'll go with, is to try to get some type of monies or advertisement out there how the program works. They're getting to know there is affordable housing, but they're not understanding how to access the apartments. It's not income-based. A lot of them think, oh, it's based on my income. Brand new apartments, I could pay $300 a month for $1,200, $1,300, or $1,400 apartment. Well, if you have a Section 8 voucher, you might very well be able to do that. But right now, it's affordable at $884, and that's like a one-bedroom. So that's going to be one of our recommendations to the council when we do that can they provide some money to help us get the program out. They're doing a wonderful job with affordable housing, but a lot of people don't know about it or understand it. So
Pulling on your thread too, around the communication needs to, improve or expand where trust is and where trust is happening. And I like the idea around thinking about a specific outreach. And I'm also thinking about what you all are saying about where good money is being spent well. And I would love, as we're thinking about this, that we're also thinking about how can we collect stories about where it's being spent well that we can tell back to the people who decided to spend the money that this is working and appreciated. And, because hearing there, you're always going to hear the pushback about, this is really confusing or people don't know how to get it. But I would love to encourage more money to be spent too. So it would be great if we could show where improvements need to happen and be able to tell the story of, and this is what you're already doing is making a difference. We can expand your reach in an efficient way and expand those sources of trust and where that's happening and build that as well. I think it's really exciting. One of the things that I definitely learned over the time here is what a big fan I am of community health workers, and I've never met one, but I'm a big fan. We need to tell that story about them.
I agree. And, to your point, taking advantage of the opportunity to share some success stories, there's another thing that it will do, which will be to allow for success duplication. Because then agencies that might not be using those specific methodologies will have something to look at as an example. I know that statistically there is not a good score for most agencies. Not just government, but agencies or organizations in general of taking success duplication, seriously and actively going after that information. So. Excellent. Questions? Comments, thoughts? All righty. We will now proceed to the committee report out from our Health Disparities Committee. We recognize Chair Sass.
All right, thank you. I will keep this short and sweet. So essentially our last committee meeting in August, we talked about what we wanted to have in our report, sort of solidify the information to put in our report. And it's there. I don't want to read it all to you. But we also spent a lot of time talking about data, what data is being collected, how do we identify what data, how do we identify the gaps in the data that's actually being collected at a county level versus a state level, and then how can we use that to identify initiatives that we need to maybe bring forward to help with health disparities. And we've talked about before, our number one recommendation number one is declare racism a public health crisis. There's a bunch of background in here as to why that's really important that we do that, because health disparity is in everything. It's in it has to do with the racism that has caused the gaps in education, employment, healthcare, housing, law enforcement. All of those things have led to the disparities in healthcare that we're seeing and the outcomes, the health outcomes that people are experiencing. So we've talked about that. And then again, really the data. We lack the data. That's sort of the report that we've all kind of talked about. What information are we collecting? What should we be collecting? Where's that gap in the data to help inform initiatives to move forward? And so as a committee, we're looking at what that looks like from a county level. What are we collecting? What are the gaps? And how can we as a committee make recommendations on really what we should be collecting so that we can get the data that we need? And then really that was it. That's sort of our next steps, is really identifying more information of what's out there. So our 3 recommendations essentially are in the report. You guys can read through those, but it all comes, I think everybody said it all comes down to data. We don't have the data, we don't have the knowledge, we don't have the information, and so that's essentially where we are, is more data gathering and understanding of where those gaps are. So
I don't remember the conference that I was at, but I heard a statistic that said the average number of chest compressions to save a life in the ER is statistically lower for people of color. That blew my mind. So data, yes, crucial.
It's huge. And we have some county health rankings, you have state data, you have all of this, but we don't have it stratified really by the social drivers of health that can give us those gaps in care. We just don't have it for the majority of our outcome measures. We just don't have the data to drive our health outcomes. And then everything else, the gaps in education and economics and all of that. So that's it, short and sweet.
Thank you.
Yep.
Questions? Excellent. Lots of good work being done. And so the chair now recognizes Ms. Brown. She will share some information about committee reports and progress, which is crucial because, once again, data.
So we wanted to have the report completed by completed and published sometime in October. We're looking more and more toward the end of October, maybe November, but my goal is that we have a good product that we can publish. So take a look at reports, any suggestions, edits, things like that need to be made. I don't know if you want to spend the time. I'm suggesting spending the time in October in your committees to further develop your reports, and we'll move forward that way once we have something that we can be proud of. I want to take any recommendations that your subcommittees come up with, compile them into a separate document, so that at our November meeting we can vote on these. That was going to be the plan for today, but there's been some changeover with our chair and things like that, and how to proceed with meetings. So if we have to push it back some, that's fine. I understand that you all are volunteers, and so I really appreciate all the time and effort being spent on your reports, and I think we have something. It's coming together. I hope that you all can see that, and so that's just kind of what I wanted to update you all on as far as the reports. February 2024 will be coming up soon. start thinking about folks that you would want to recruit to the commission. We will have some boards, some seats that are available. We have some staggered 2 and 4 year terms. So I'll be meeting with the folks whose term ends in February, and then talking or deciding whether or not you want to stay on, that type of thing, and then some intentional recruitment to this commission. So far the work. But all in all, the reports it's starting to come together and look like a good product. But I want to make sure that we're all happy with what we have, and are ready to publish that document and have consensus in your committees, and then we're able to bring those back to the full commission in November.
I have a quick question for you, follow up on that. I know that you are doing a lot of good work in parallel to what we're talking about. Is there anything that we can do in any of our reports that tells your story in a way that would be
I will be
meaningful?
writing a separate report.
Okay, great. I should have known that. Should have known that. Good.
It'll be more of an update, but yes.
Well, along those lines, I was going to ask Ms. Brown if it's possible, and you may already be doing this, if there are, based upon your review of the reports that have been seen, if there's any, and I actually already asked you this just for me, but if there are any opportunities to where you see something that is like, oh, think about this, think about that, if you could send that to the entire group, or if it's more appropriate, just reach out to the individual committees to help maybe guide anything that you see just
Yes.
kind of glaringly obvious.
Yes, I will definitely do that. I will say a really good example of the format that I envisioned is exactly what I received from Ms. Sachs. And that was it gave context to the recommendations, and some background information, references, all of those things. That's kind of the type of document that I think we can really be proud of and publish. It's gonna, like the same way you all are using the 2020 report will be the same way that, if there are folks that are rolling off this commission, will be using you all's report. So it's gonna be a living document that we want folks to take seriously.
All right, so be like Ms. Sass, and
I'm sorry, but she
No.
did a really good job. I had to give her kudos for
I appreciate that, thank you.
yeah, I was talking earlier about success duplication. So here we are in the house. All right, great. Thank you. Did anyone have any questions for Ms. Brown? Any other questions? All right, thank you. Alrighty, so now we're at the discussion portion, and I do believe we have some new business on the table.
So, Mr. Chair, in my exuberance in getting a new discussion item on the agenda, I realized I covered it in my summary. We had a discussion about the IB audit, so I give you all back some time.
Thank you. Yeah, I was looking at my note and it said DIB audits, and I was like, I feel like, yeah,
I
okay.
thought we were about to go to a vote or something.
Right?
Yeah, I remember you discussing.
So, we're good, we're covered.
Excellent. Awesome. All right, so other than that, just opening it up for discussion with the remaining time that we have to our commission members. All right, all minds clear. Motion to adjourn?
So.
Second.
All right. Adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.